There is a kind of power that doesn't announce itself. It doesn't demand to be understood or validated. It simply exists, quietly, confidently, untouchably. That power begins the moment you choose not to explain yourself, when you stop defending, justifying, or correcting how others perceive you. Something remarkable happens. People start imagining, and what they imagine will always be far more compelling than what you could ever say. The silence becomes a mirror, and in it they see what they fear, what they desire, what they secretly wish they could be. You stop being a person in their eyes. You become a mystery, and mystery is the oxygen of power. The mind cannot tolerate an unknown, so it fills the silence with stories. And when you refuse to correct those stories, you control them. You become the author without writing a word. Every powerful figure in history understood this. Kings, thinkers, seducers, strategists. They mastered the art of restraint, not because they had nothing to say, but because they knew that words weaken the spell. When you speak too much, you dissolve into clarity, and clarity kills fascination. The greatest danger to power is transparency. The moment people can fully read you, they stop respecting you, they stop fearing you, they stop desiring you. Mystery is not deception, it's protection. It guards your essence from being consumed by the noise of others. The world rewards those who can stay silent in a storm, who can let others reveal themselves while they remain unreadable. Every silence you hold creates tension, and tension is influence. The person who can endure tension without breaking it controls the room. Most people rush to fill silence because they cannot bear the weight of uncertainty. They crave reassurance, even at the cost of their dignity. They speak to prove they exist. But the powerful know that existence does not need to be proven. It only needs to be felt. When you say nothing, you become more than a presence. You become a question without an answer. And that question begins to live in their mind long after you've left the room. They wonder what you think, what you feel, what you'll do next. They play conversations in their heads that never happened. They try to decode your pauses, your tone, your stillness, and all the while you remain in control because you've forced them to focus on you. Silence makes you the center of gravity. Words scatter energy. Silence concentrates it. Every word you don't say builds pressure in their imagination. Every pause becomes a psychological space where power breathes. To say nothing is not to withdraw, it is to invite pursuit. The moment you stop explaining, they start chasing. That is the paradox of power. The less you reveal, the more they want to know. You become an emotional puzzle that they can't solve, and people are addicted to puzzles. They want to understand what moves you, what affects you, what can make you break your composure. But when your face remains calm, when your reactions are measured, they find no openings. You become untouchable. Your silence becomes a weapon sharper than any word, because words can be argued, twisted, challenged, but silence cannot be defeated. It just stands there, like a mirror reflecting their own noise. The weak crumble under the weight of their own overexposure. They think vulnerability means openness, when in truth, power demands selectivity. You must reveal only what strengthens your image, never what weakens it. Silence allows you to decide which parts of yourself the world deserves to see. You stop being predictable, and unpredictability breeds respect. When people cannot anticipate you, they start treading carefully. They choose their words more wisely. They study your mood, your silence, your absence. You turn from participant to observer, and the observer always holds the advantage, because the one who watches learns, and the one who speaks exposes. Silence trains you to see what others miss. When you are quiet, you notice the tremors in tone, the shift in eyes, the cracks in confidence. You see the truth that words try to hide, and that vision becomes your silent empire. You lead not through noise, but through awareness. This is why powerful people often appear detached. They are not detached, they are observing. They are collecting data in the spaces between words. They understand that every conversation is a battlefield of ego, and silence is the terrain where egos destroy themselves. When you let others speak freely, they reveal their insecurities, their vanity, their lack of control. You, meanwhile, remain the constant, anchored, calm, unreadable. Eventually, they start to seek your approval, not because you demanded it, but because your composure makes theirs feel inadequate. Silence makes them project greatness onto you. It tricks the mind into assuming that what it cannot access must be superior. That is why the most desired people say the least. They make others fill the silence with fantasy. And fantasy is stronger than reality. Reality can disappoint. Fantasy can't be disproved. When you speak less, you become whoever they want you to be. And that illusion works to your advantage. Whether in love, business, or power, the principle is the same. The less they know, the more they invest. Your silence becomes their obsession. But this power is not for the weak. It demands self-control, discipline, and emotional detachment. Because silence will test you, it will invite misinterpretation, provoke insecurity, and tempt you to break it. You will want to explain yourself, to defend your intentions, to correct their wrong assumptions. But you must resist. Every time you break silence to clarify, you surrender the mystery. You prove you care too much about being understood, and caring too much makes you predictable. The truly powerful don't need to be understood. They only need to be respected. So hold your silence like armor. Let them misunderstand. Let them wonder. Let them fill the gaps with their imagination, because their imagination will work for you more effectively than any explanation ever could. In the realm of power, words are currency, and silence is wealth. The poor spend quickly to be seen. The rich conserve to be desired. Power is the art of conservation, conserving energy, emotion, and reaction. Every moment you remain silent, you accumulate unseen strength. You are not passive, you are preparing. You are letting them speak their truth so that yours can remain unshaken. And when you finally choose to speak, every word lands with the weight of silence behind it. The world leans in because you've trained it to listen. That is the paradox. The quieter you are, the louder your presence becomes. And the more they imagine, the more you control the narrative without ever touching it. This is not manipulation, it's mastery. Because real mastery is not about force, it's about influence. And influence at its highest form is invisible. Silence is that invisibility. It's the unseen gravity that makes others orbit around you without knowing why. They think you're mysterious, but what they're really feeling is your control over their imagination. And imagination is where all power begins. When you let them imagine everything, you become everything they can't define. You transcend explanation. You become an experience, not a statement. And that is the highest form of power, power that does not speak because it doesn't need to. Silence is not emptiness. It's a force that expands inside people until it becomes unbearable. When you stay quiet, others don't hear nothing. They hear themselves, their doubts, their insecurities, their guilt. Your silence turns into an amplifier for their mind. And that's the essence of control. You don't dominate them directly. You make them dominate themselves through the thoughts you provoke. They start replaying everything they said to you, searching for hidden meanings that don't exist. They read between lines that were never written. They project their conscience onto your calmness. You become a mirror they can't escape from. And because of that, silence is not passive. It's invasive. It enters them, grows inside them, and twists their perception until your presence becomes psychological territory. You live rent-free in their thoughts, not because you forced your way in, but because you left them with unanswered questions. The human mind hates unfinished patterns. It craves closure. And silence denies closure. That's why it hurts more than words ever could. A cruel sentence might sting for a day, but a wordless pause lingers for years. Silence becomes memory. It becomes legend. Every time they remember your quietness, they feel small, uncertain, inferior. They'll tell others about it, but they won't know why it affected them so much. It's because silence exposes what words conceal: insecurity, dependence, weakness. Most people cannot endure the void. They fill it with chatter, gossip, justification. They talk not to communicate, but to escape the echo of their own emptiness. But you are different. You understand that silence is not an absence of noise, but the presence of power. The quiet person commands attention because they don't waste it. Their energy is condensed, refined, distilled into essence. While others scatter themselves through endless talking, you accumulate presence through stillness. That's why when you finally speak, your words hit deeper. They sound like truth, even if they're simple, because they come from restraint. Every withheld sentence adds weight to the one that follows. Power is not measured by how much you say, but by how much you can afford not to. Weak people overshare because they need validation. They want to be understood. They hope to be accepted. The powerful don't seek that. They already own it within themselves. Their silence is proof of internal wealth. They don't need to announce who they are because their composure says it for them. And that composure creates an aura that others interpret as confidence, mystery, or even danger. In reality, it's simply control. The control of emotion, of impulse, of ego. That control radiates a subtle dominance that everyone feels, but no one can name. People can sense it in your pauses, in your stillness, in your eyes that don't rush to react. It disarms them. They start adjusting their tone, softening their behavior, measuring their words. They don't realize it, but they're aligning themselves with your tempo. That's the secret of power. Whoever controls the tempo controls the interaction. The loud lose tempo because they act on impulse. The silent gain tempo because they observe, wait, and choose. It's not about never speaking. It's about speaking last, when the noise has revealed all its weaknesses. When you let others expose their patterns, you learn how to move unseen. Your silence is intelligence disguised as humility. It lets others underestimate you while you gather information. They assume quietness means submission, but in truth, it's surveillance. You're not retreating, you're studying. You're waiting for the moment when your words will carry the maximum effect with minimal exposure. The quiet strategist always wins, because they waste no energy. They let their opponents destroy themselves through excess. Every unnecessary word someone speaks is a confession. They reveal their boundaries, their fears, their vanities. And all you do is listen. That's how silence turns into a weapon. It collects ammunition without firing a shot. People will tell you everything if you just give them space. The silence becomes unbearable for them, so they fill it with truth disguised as talk. Then when the time comes, you act with precision while they drown in their own noise. That's why the most dangerous people are the calm ones. They don't rush, they don't argue, they don't explain. They understand that reacting is a form of surrender. The moment you react, you've let someone else dictate your state. Silence protects you from that. It becomes a fortress that emotions can't breach. Inside it, you can think clearly, move strategically, and choose whether something even deserves your energy. Silence gives you space, and in that space, perspective is born. You stop operating on impulse, you start operating on purpose. You realize that most conflicts in life are invitations to waste your energy, and the powerful decline those invitations with silence. You cannot fight someone who won't engage. You cannot wound someone who won't react. The absence of response becomes a shield that frustrates the aggressor. They grow louder, more desperate, more exposed, while you remain untouched. And soon, others notice. They see the contrast between your composure and their chaos. They start associating you with strength and them with instability. That's how silence not only defends your image, it elevates it. You become the reference point for control. People start to measure their behavior against yours. They say things like, "You never lose your calm, you're so composed, you're mysterious." What they're really saying is, "You make me aware of my own lack of control." And that awareness is magnetic. We're drawn to what we can't master. Silence makes you ungraspable, and that makes you unforgettable. It's the same in attraction. When you stop chasing, people start wondering why. When you stop explaining, they start craving meaning. When you detach, they become attached. You reverse the polarity of desire, because desire feeds on distance, not proximity. The more someone feels they understand you, the faster their fascination dies. That's why silence is the fuel of mystery. It keeps the distance alive. And in that distance, fantasy grows. They start imagining the parts of you they can't see, and imagination always paints you in a more powerful light. You become larger than life, even if you've said nothing. That's the silent charisma of those who don't reveal everything. They let others fall in love with their illusion. The illusion that you are calm because you know more, that you are distant because you have better things to think about, that you are silent because you are superior. Whether those things are true doesn't matter. Perception is reality. And in the theater of perception, silence is the most elegant costume. It hides flaws, amplifies strengths, and commands the stage without movement. But to wear silence well, you must own it internally. You can't fake calm. If your silence is born from fear, people feel hesitation. But if it's born from conviction, they feel reverence. True silence comes from certainty, certainty that you don't need to prove anything. When you reach that level, silence becomes effortless. You no longer calculate it, you embody it. It's not a tactic, it's your nature. You don't speak because you no longer seek validation. You observe because you've learned that power isn't loud, it's still. And that stillness is contagious. The world starts slowing down around you, syncing with your rhythm. Even in chaos, you remain centered. That's when people start following your energy without realizing it. You've become the calm in the storm, the silent anchor that others cling to, and that is the ultimate expression of power. To influence without effort, to dominate without force, to lead without words. Silence is not withdrawal. It's presence purified. When you master it, you don't just control conversations, you control emotions. You decide when tension rises and when it breaks. You decide when attention shifts and when it stays. You become the conductor of invisible music, and the world dances to your rhythm without hearing a single note. Silence does something words can't. It creates space, and space creates meaning. In a world addicted to noise, the person who can remain silent becomes sacred. The moment you stop explaining, people begin to interpret. They search for meaning in your pauses, in your absence, in your restraint. You give them fragments and they build the rest. The more you withhold, the more they invest. This is how influence works, not through excess, but through economy. You give them just enough to wonder and then you disappear. Every silence becomes a thread that connects their curiosity to your image. And slowly, without realizing it, they start thinking of you when you're not even there. Silence is the seed of presence. Absence is its echo. The less they hear from you, the louder your memory becomes. The world trains people to believe that speaking equals strength, but the opposite is true. Speaking too much is weakness. It's the desperate attempt to control perception through sound. Silence, on the other hand, trusts that perception will serve you. You let others build the image you want them to see without ever touching it. Because when you remain quiet, they fill in the blanks with admiration or fear, depending on what they need to believe. That's the brilliance of silence. It bends reality through imagination. You don't have to prove who you are. You let them imagine someone greater. They assume depth because you don't display it. They assume wisdom because you don't explain. They assume strength because you don't rush. And every assumption they make becomes a form of surrender. They give you authority in their mind. They give you importance by wondering what you're thinking. They give you respect by trying not to offend your quiet. It's invisible submission. You didn't demand it. They gave it freely because your silence made them conscious of their own noise. And the human ego hates that awareness. When someone is quiet in front of us, we feel our own nervousness rise. We start to question if we've said too much, if we're being judged, if we've lost control of the moment. That discomfort is your leverage. You don't need to say anything. They'll expose themselves trying to escape it. Silence is psychological gravity. It pulls truth out of others. It makes their masks slip. Watch what happens when you don't fill the space. Their voices grow shaky, their words multiply, their defenses crack. They will confess things they never intended to, not because you asked, but because you didn't. That's the paradox. Silence feels like pressure. It demands to be filled, and whoever breaks first loses control. That's why silence is not just power, it's discipline. It's the ability to endure the tension that others can't. It's emotional self-possession, disguised as stillness. You're not passive, you're in command. You're allowing the noise to reveal its patterns. You learn to read the pauses between words, the micro-expressions, the subtle contradictions. Because when you're silent, your senses sharpen. You hear what others miss. You see what others hide. The talkative are blind. They drown in their own sound. But the silent see everything. They are the predators of perception. They move slowly, think deeply, and strike rarely, but with precision. That's why silence is feared. It unnerves people because it cannot be controlled. You can argue with words, but you can't argue with silence. It gives no response, no closure, no weakness. It's like standing before a wall that reflects nothing back. It forces people to face themselves, and most people can't stand the reflection, so they label you cold, distant, arrogant, anything that helps them explain the discomfort you make them feel. Let them. Their words are confessions of powerlessness. The truth is, silence is not cold. It's pure. It's uncorrupted by the need to perform. It's the highest form of dignity. You no longer trade your truth for approval. You no longer negotiate your worth through noise. You've learned that those who truly understand you don't need constant explanation, and those who don't never will. So you stop wasting energy on proving. You stop feeding those who misunderstand you. You let silence separate the real from the temporary. And that separation changes everything. The right people will be drawn to your quiet. They'll feel its depth, its strength, its calm. The wrong ones will be repelled by it. They'll need constant attention, constant reassurance, constant noise. That's how silence filters your world. It acts like gravity. What is real stays. What is weak drifts away. And what remains is clarity. You realize that silence doesn't isolate you. It refines your circle. You start seeing the power of absence not as loss, but as selection. You're no longer available to everyone, and that scarcity gives you value. When you stop showing up for every conversation, every argument, every drama, people start realizing your worth. They remember the calm you brought, the balance you represented, the respect your presence demanded, and in your absence they finally see your impact. That's the cruel irony. People only understand the weight of your silence after it's gone. You could speak for years and not be heard, but one withdrawal, one act of quiet detachment, and they feel the void like a wound. Because your silence was never empty, it was full of everything they took for granted. That's why when you say nothing, they start to imagine everything. They imagine your thoughts, your plans, your emotions, your reasons, and imagination magnifies. It turns small mysteries into grand ones. You become larger than life simply because you're no longer accessible. Availability diminishes respect. Distance multiplies it. That's the eternal law of perception. Scarcity creates value. Silence is the ultimate scarcity in a loud world. Everyone speaks, few listen, and almost no one endures stillness. When you master stillness, you become an anomaly. People can't categorize you. You no longer play by their emotional tempo. You make your own rhythm, and slow, deliberate, powerful, and soon they start to follow it without realizing it. That's how influence works. It's not loud persuasion, it's quiet alignment. Silence draws people into your frequency. It teaches them how to approach you, how to speak to you, how to behave around you. It rewires their behavior without commands. That's real authority, the kind that doesn't need to shout to be obeyed. Because silence has something words never will: finality. When you say nothing, there's no debate, no correction, no weakness. The moment ends with you still in control. Silence is closure disguised as patience. It leaves no trace, but it changes everything. The next time you're in a room and the noise rises, observe what happens when you stay calm. Watch how voices start to drop, how eyes start to turn to you, how even those who ignored you before now wait for your reaction. They'll call it respect, but it's more than that. It's recognition. They feel your inner stability, and in a world of chaos, stability is magnetic. The silent are not invisible. They are unforgettable. They don't fade into the background. They define it. And that is the secret. Silence doesn't remove you from power. It places you above it. Because only those who have mastered themselves can master the moment. And silence is self-mastery made visible. There is a quiet moment that separates those who seek control from those who already have it. That moment is the decision to remain silent when everything inside you wants to speak. It's the test of strength that most fail, because silence reveals not only your power, but your wounds. When you stay quiet in conflict, people think you're calm, but inside you are training your impulses. You are killing the need to react, and that death is where maturity begins. Silence is not natural. It's earned. It takes the kind of emotional discipline that few possess, the ability to let someone misunderstand you and still remain at peace. The ability to hear lies about yourself and not defend them. The ability to feel anger rising inside you and not let it escape through words. That restraint is power in its purest form, because it means that your state of mind is no longer determined by others. You've broken the chain of reaction that controls most people. You've learned to rule yourself, and that's the highest rule of all. When you say nothing, you teach the world that your energy is expensive, that your emotions are not up for public consumption. And soon, people stop expecting your validation. They start measuring their words, fearing your quiet judgment. You don't even need to demand respect. It arrives on its own, carried by the tension your silence creates. Because deep down, everyone recognizes restraint as power. The one who reacts loses control. The one who observes controls everything. The greatest leaders, thinkers, and warriors understood this, the power of not being provoked. They used silence to test others, to draw out truth, to measure loyalty. Silence reveals what words conceal. It's the stage where other people perform their character, while you watch from behind the curtain. They'll show you who they are if you just stop interrupting. Every silence you hold becomes a test, and most will fail it. They will talk too much, reveal too soon, feel too deeply, and you'll learn everything you need to know without ever asking. The world becomes transparent to the silent mind. Because silence sharpens perception. It strips away the illusions that noise builds. You start hearing intent behind tone, insecurity behind laughter, desperation behind stories. You stop reacting to appearances because you've learned to sense what's underneath. That is why silence feels divine. It's not emptiness, it's insight. You start realizing that most people speak to escape themselves, not to communicate. They hide in their own words, but you don't. You've stopped running, you've learned to find comfort in stillness. You've discovered that peace is not the absence of chaos, it's the mastery of response. And so you move through the world differently. You walk into a room and you don't rush to fill the air. You let others scramble for attention. You let them reveal their intentions. Your calmness becomes unsettling to them, not because it's cold, but because it's untouchable. They can't provoke you. They can't read you. They can't control you. And what people can't control, they respect, they fear, or they admire. Sometimes all three. Silence places you outside the reach of ordinary influence. You are no longer emotionally available for manipulation. You are not reacting to words. You are responding to meaning. That shift separates the masters from the followers. Silence makes you dangerous, not because you attack, but because you can't be attacked. Every insult dies in the air before it reaches you. Every argument collapses because you never join it. You've turned your composure into a weapon that requires no movement. But don't mistake silence for absence. You are not disengaged. You are simply selective. You've learned that speaking is a privilege, not a reflex. And that privilege must be earned by the gravity of the moment. Every word you say now carries intention. It enters the world like a blade, clean and precise. You've traded volume for impact, and in that trade you've become unforgettable. People start quoting you, repeating your sentences, analyzing your tone. They hear the silence between your words and think it's wisdom. But it's not wisdom, it's clarity. It's the result of listening more than you speak, of seeing more than you show. Silence is not the absence of communication. It's the perfection of it. Because everything that truly matters, respect, fear, love, authority, exists beyond words. It's felt, not spoken. The person who masters silence speaks directly to the subconscious. They don't argue, they imprint. Their presence becomes an idea in other people's minds, and ideas can't be defeated. They grow, spread, can take root in imagination. That's why silence, when used deliberately, outlasts even time. Words fade, stories change, but the memory of someone who never needed to explain themselves lingers forever. We remember their calm, their eyes, their restraint. We remember how they made us feel uncertain, because uncertainty is unforgettable. You can't stop thinking about someone who said nothing when they could have said everything. That moment replays in your head endlessly because silence demands meaning. You assign it, you reinterpret it, and still it escapes definition. That's the genius of saying nothing. You make others your storytellers. They write your legend without your effort. They project greatness onto your quiet, depth onto your restraint, power onto your indifference. And all you did was control what you didn't say. But silence isn't just for others, it's for you. It gives you distance from your emotions, space from your thoughts, power over your impulses. It makes you your own master. In silence, you begin to hear your true voice, the one that isn't influenced by fear or ego. You realize how much of what you used to say was noise born from insecurity. You spoke to fill the void, to prove something, to be seen. But now you see the futility of it. You understand that everything real is felt, not declared. Love doesn't need constant words. Strength doesn't need proof. Confidence doesn't need performance. And truth doesn't need defense. Silence becomes your proof. Your strength, your confidence. You stop wasting energy convincing others and start conserving it for creation, for strategy, for presence. You become precise with your life. That precision becomes your power. Because in a world drowning in words, precision is a rare art. People begin to crave your approval again, not because you flatter them, but because you withhold it. They want your attention, your validation, your words. They want what you give sparingly. That scarcity makes your silence valuable. You've turned absence into currency, and everyone wants to buy. But only few can afford it. That's how you filter the world effortlessly, through your silence. The unworthy expose themselves by trying too hard to break it. The wise learn to respect it. And you? You stay calm, observing, knowing that every word withheld increases your influence. Because influence is not about being known, it's about being remembered. And no one forgets the one who said nothing, but made them feel everything. The highest level of communication is not expression, it's presence. When your energy speaks before your mouth does, when your silence makes others adjust their tone, when your calm turns their chaos into reflection, that's when you've entered the realm of psychological power. It's no longer about who dominates the conversation, it's about who shapes its gravity. The person who says less always dictates more, because silence rewires attention. People lean in when you pause. They wonder what you know, what you're thinking, what you're holding back. And that wonder is the leash of influence. You don't pull it, they do. They pull themselves toward you, needing clarity you'll never give. That's how you train the world to value your voice. You make it rare. The less you speak, the more each word carries a kind of sacred weight. Even your pauses feel intentional. Your presence becomes a message that says, I am in control. Not of others, of yourself. That self-control terrifies people because most have never met someone who doesn't need to be understood. The need to be understood is the softest part of the ego. It's where people can hurt you, manipulate you, or drain you. But when you let go of that need, when you stop explaining who you are, what you mean, what you feel, you become untouchable. They can guess. They can project, they can invent, but they can't reach you. You've become psychological distance personified, and that distance makes you magnetic, because everyone secretly desires what they can't fully grasp. That's why mystery outlives attention, because it never closes the loop. Every time someone thinks they've figured you out, your silence proves they haven't. You remain an unfinished sentence in their mind, an image that refuses to fade. They'll replay moments with you, searching for meaning in gestures, in eye contact, in things you never said. You've become their internal dialogue. That's not manipulation, it's resonance. It's the echo of control that silence leaves behind. You're not forcing them to think of you, they simply can't stop. Because the human mind is wired to complete what feels incomplete. And your silence is the ultimate incompletion. It lures thought, like gravity pulls light. The more you withhold, the brighter you become. This is why those who talk endlessly are forgotten, while those who hold their words become legends. The quiet one in history is always the one remembered, the one whose motives are guessed, whose emotions are studied, whose decisions are analyzed. Because silence builds myth and myth builds power, You are no longer human to them. You are an idea, and ideas don't die. But silence requires faith in yourself. It's easy to stay quiet when you feel detached, but true mastery is staying quiet even when your pride screams to be heard. That's when silence becomes transcendence. You're no longer reacting to others. You're communing with something higher, your own awareness. You see that noise never changes truth. It only hides it. So you stop fighting perception. You stop chasing understanding. You let time speak for you, because truth always returns in silence. The longer you stay quiet, the more clarity grows in the minds of those who doubted you. They begin to realize that the calm they mistook for weakness was wisdom, that your restraint was not indifference, it was intelligence, that your distance was not rejection, it was respect for your own energy. And by then, you've already won, because power is not about victory in the moment, it's about endurance in memory. When the noise fades, silence remains, and the one who mastered silence remains with it. You can lose arguments, opportunities, people, but silence keeps your dignity intact. It keeps your image untarnished. It preserves your control over what they'll remember about you. Every great strategist understands this. Sometimes saying nothing achieves more than 1,000 clever words, because silence never contradicts itself. It never ages. It never gets misquoted. It lives forever in the imagination, shaping perception long after you've gone. That's the secret most never learn, that real dominance is subtle. It doesn't need to raise its voice. It doesn't seek attention. It commands it. It doesn't explain. It lets others explain it to themselves. That's the power of saying nothing. You create infinite versions of yourself in the minds of others, and all of them serve your myth. But silence is not the end. It's the foundation. Once you've mastered it, you begin to choose your words like weapons, not decorations. You speak less but with precision. You let each sentence carry the tension of all the ones you never said. And when you finally speak, it feels like revelation. People listen not because of what you're saying, but because of who you became by not speaking. You've turned your voice into an event, and that's when you understand the ultimate truth. Silence isn't the absence of power. It's the proof of it. Those who speak to be seen are still searching for validation. Those who stay silent have already found it within. Silence is the mirror of the self-sufficient. It is the language of those who have nothing to prove and everything to observe. And when you reach that level, you realize that true strength doesn't roar. It breathes quietly. It's not about being heard, it's about being felt. You don't need to dominate the room, you simply are the room. You radiate a calm that shifts the air, that slows the chaos, that makes noise embarrassed of itself. And in that quiet, everything bends toward you, because silence, when mastered, doesn't separate you from the world. It makes the world revolve around you. So when you say nothing, you are not withholding. You are creating, you are sculpting perception, bending emotion, defining reality without sound. You are turning absence into influence, distance into desire, restraint into dominance. That is the code of silence, the invisible art that few ever master, but all instinctively respect. If this truth resonates, it's because you've already started to wake up. You've felt the pull of composure in a world that rewards chaos. You've begun to understand that silence is not empty. It's full of power waiting to be understood. Subscribe, because real power doesn't shout, it whispers,